The first incident happened about 2 years ago. At the time, I was living with my family on a 5-acre piece of property literally right off the freeway. Like the back of our yard ended, and the freeway was about 10 feet away from the back fence. Anyway, we lived there for about 8 years, and for a while nothing happened. So for context to this story, the house was at the front of the property, maybe 40 feet from the road. Not the freeway, but a back road. We had a small corral or shelter we had built right after moving there for my brother's 2 horses. However, at the time of this story, my brother had moved out and taken his horses with him. My mini pet cow, Dexter, lived at the corral at this time. The corral is maybe 100 or 150 feet from the house. If this makes no sense, I'm sorry. I'm not good with distances. It was closer to the freeway than the house, though. Anyway, one night I had gotten my 3-month-old border collie and taken her with me up the field to the corral to feed my cow. I have pretty bad eyesight, and I wear glasses, but at the time I had just started wearing them, and couldn't wear them long without getting a migraine, so I had left them in the house. Things far away from me were super blurry. We had 5-acre properties on both sides of our property. To the south, a very nice family lived. To the north was an empty lot that switched owners a few times, but nothing was ever built there. While I was feeding the cow, I noticed something or someone standing on the property to the north, which no one owned at the time. I brushed it off at first, but there was a tree on that property not far from our fence, and I couldn't see well because I wasn't wearing my glasses. Anyway, I turned back to Dexter to throw another pitchfork of hay to him, and when I turned back around to get another pitchfork full, the object, which was black and blurry, had moved closer to the fence, to the point where it was maybe 10 feet away from me, about 2 feet away from the fence, but still in the neighbor's yard. And I could see the tree I had originally thought it was behind them quite a ways. I freaked out, because my eyesight was so bad, everything that far away was so blurry, I have no idea what it was, but I'm positive it was a human. I grabbed my dog, and because I didn't want whatever it was to know I had noticed it, pretended I was talking to my dog, said, "Come on, girl," and ran back down the field to the house. Once I reached the house, I looked back to see whatever it was had disappeared. This also happened right after sunset, so it was pretty dark. I thought about this for hours, and eventually brushed it off as my imagination. And because I hadn't been wearing my glasses, I was able to eventually convince myself it was nothing. That only lasted for a couple days. This time it was during the day. I was out front this time, in our rose garden, playing with my cats. I heard a buzzing, which I immediately recognized as a drone. I knew this because a few of my cousins and friends had drones, and would fly them at our house to get full views of the freeway. I looked up and found the thing hovering right above me. When I noticed it, it flew away. However, a few hours later when I was on the back lawn playing with my dog, it reappeared. Both of these times I was wearing my glasses, and can say for sure it was a small gray drone. Again, when I looked at it, it flew away. Over the next few days, most of the time I was outside, and I would hear the drone, see it, or just feel like I was being watched. I don't know how to explain that feeling, and it's like you can just feel eyes on you. I got so uncomfortable I would only go outside when I had to. I would also like to point out, wherever I went from home, nothing like this happened, no matter where I went. This continued the rest of the time we lived there. Also, my dog, who lived in the backyard, would randomly bark at things at night, though it could have been deer or coyotes. Another strange thing was sometimes at night I would hear taps or knocks on my bedroom window, and I never dared open them. One of my brothers often saw the silhouette of a person wearing a ball cap walking past his room in the middle of the night. We had an 8-foot fence surrounding our yard to keep the deer and coyotes out, and an 8-foot tall gate. This gate could only be opened by a fob, and it was hard to climb over. We didn't have a main gate, so it wasn't just like anyone could walk into our yard. We also lived in pretty much the middle of nowhere, with only a few neighbors. Anyway, about a year later after the first strange occurrence, we decided to move, as the house was a 7-bedroom and there were only my parents, me, and my brother living there. At the time we moved in, our other siblings had lived with us, but had moved out over the 8 years. We needed to downsize not only the home, but 5 acres was getting hard for us to take care of. So we moved to a small house in a pretty neighborhood with neighbors on every side but behind us. We have a huge field behind us. Since we moved here, I have never felt watched or seen a drone. I mostly forgot about the weird things that had happened until about a month ago. After we moved here, we got a small inside dog who sleeps with me. I still have my border collie and a husky mix, but the house is too small for them, and they are more guard dogs and live outside. Anyway, one night I opened my window, since I have no fan in my bedroom, and I was roasting. I opened the windows a couple inches and closed the blinds. While I was scrolling on my phone, suddenly my dog, who's curled up sleeping at the end of my bed, sits up and looks at the window. My window is on the front of the house, facing the street. He stared at the closed blinds for a second, then growled. I was terrified. This dog was only 8 months old, and he had only growled playfully when I was playing tug-of-war with him. He continued to growl at the window, even after I told him to stop. He is a very obedient puppy. I finally opened the blinds. There was a street light between ours and the neighbor's yard, so I could see pretty good, and I couldn't see a thing. I closed the blinds and laid back down. Not 10 seconds later, he started growling again. I was so scared, I got up and checked again, but still couldn't see anything. I finally shut the window and locked it. When I laid back down, he curled up next to me and went back to sleep as though nothing had happened. This happened again about a week later. Since then, I haven't opened my window at night. Still, there is one more thing that happened that may not be related but is unexplainable. Me and my mom have been renovating the front yard since my brother and dad worked, and after we moved into this house, it was untouched for 8 months. Anyway, we pulled up some dead bushes, and they had been planted inside tomato cages. I have no idea why. Most of the cages were twisted and unusual, all except one. Mom put it in between the 2 giant pine trees in the front yard, since we were going to use it the next morning, and it was getting dark. The next morning, the tomato cage was on the front lawn, destroyed. I mean destroyed. Twisted in all manner of ways, and it was metal, meaning no animal could have done it. I still have no explanation for any of these events. I have no idea if I have a stalker or not, but it's freaky AF. There may or may not be a scientific explanation for what we have experienced. It seems too confidential, so let us dive in from the start. It all started with one random night in the middle of January when my boyfriend and I said our usual goodnight, hit the hay, and drifted off to sleep. However, when I woke up the next day, I saw I had a video call from him at 3:25 a.m. It was unusual, and I asked him about it, only to find out that his phone had been dead the whole night, and he plugged it in the next morning. So the possibility of a video call from a dead phone? Unlikely. A few days later, we go to bed with the same usual goodnight routine. When I woke up the next day and checked my phone, I see a text sent from my phone to his at 2:59 a.m. Just one single text. That's it. I was asleep the whole night and have no memory of ever unlocking my phone and messaging him at all. The next day again, the same thing happens. A different message to him at the same time, 2:59 a.m. Just one single message, but a different one this time. Again, I have no memory of this ever happening. We found it eerie, but had possible conclusions that it could be a case of server reset or some sort of network issue. And then it stopped, until a few weeks ago, when similar events started occurring again, and more severe. We were texting around 1 a.m. when we said our good night and drifted off to sleep. I was really tired and slept the whole night without waking up in the middle of the night. The next day it happened again. We saw messages sent from my phone to his phone at 1:56 a.m. The messages read, "Baby, it's 2." Which is a pretty odd thing to say for myself, because if I wake up from my sleep, I would usually ask if he's awake first, or text about me not getting sleep. The tone of the text did not sound like me at all. Those text messages in a way proved it could not be me writing it, but there's no one else using my phone either. And the most recent incident happened last week. I slept at 2 a.m. and was pretty tired and exhausted from the day's work. My boyfriend, however, stayed up at night finishing his work, and while he was texting me, he got a few messages from my phone at 3:08 a.m. He saw it instantly and replied to it, but my phone went offline soon after. What's more scary is the texts that were sent from my phone weren't exactly related to what he was talking about. I was asleep the whole night. We still have no idea of what caused all these texts, and the fact it only happens in the middle of the night and never during the day doesn't make it any better. I'm a teen. I live with both of my grandparents from my mother's side. This house I live in at the moment is a very old one, probably been here since the 1960s or 70s. A lot of people had lived here and had lived with us, relatives, nannies, and friends. My grandma once told me that someone had died in one of the rooms this house has, and that room once was my mom's. A lot had died here. She'd study there all the time, but sometimes whenever she does, she'd feel a heavy weight on her back, as if someone was on top of her, riding her back. She couldn't get up, or that sometimes she'd feel like someone's watching her. And because of that, my mom barely sleeps there ever since. For years it had been a storage room instead of a room to sleep. Moreover, there are moments when someone would call my grandma's name downstairs. My grandma would think that it's a friend of hers or a relative asking for help or something else. Once she'd get down and open the door, no one's there. She told me that it had occurred many times to her. I never believed it and thought that she's just making things up just to scare me, or she's just being paranoid. One night, I was sleeping on a long wooden chair downstairs after watching lots and lots of movies, and it was around 4 a.m. that morning. Somebody was calling me by my nickname. I thought it could be my grandpa. I thought that he was dying, or that what if I'm about to witness a murder? I got into his room and saw him sleep very well and comfortably. I went upstairs to go check my grandma, because what if my assumptions actually happened to her and not to my gramps? I saw her fast asleep. I panicked when I arrived and asked loudly, "Are you okay? Did something happen?" I woke her up. She told me everything's alright. That's when I realized that what my grandma told me was true. Sometimes while I'm watching TV downstairs or cooking past midnight, I feel like somebody's watching me. What I'm scared of is that something might happen to both of my grandparents. We're not scared and already used to it though. We don't really care about it. I just want to share some strange experiences we've encountered.